Hi everybody, so today we're going to have a little recap on intertextuality, which I'm hoping you can remember from year 10, but if not, that's okay, we're going to go over it anyway. So, for today, the definition that we're going to use of intertextuality is the relationship between texts. So here you can see the prefix inter, which means basically between, among, mutually, all of these words that show some sort of relationship. So here we've got the word international, meaning relationship between different nations to create an international world. And so it just means that the word intertextual means between texts, or the relationship between texts. Now here we've got some images of Frankenstein, starting with Mary Shelley's novel, going into a painting, and into all these different film versions of Frankenstein that we've got.
Will change the world. We shall create a life out of death. It's alive.
Do you realize how significant this is?
Oh, I have an inkling.
I'm sorry, boy.
So this is what intertextuality is, and this is a really obvious one because these are adaptations, or they've taken ideas from the original and they've created, kind of like Frankenweenie, they've taken those themes and they've created a new text. But these are intertextual because it's very obvious from titles and from the images that we see that there's a relationship between these texts. So what are the intertextual types? We've got down the side here, appropriation, adaptation, allusion, and parody. Now the two we're going to concentrate on are appropriation and adaptation because for our unit, they're the ones that we're going to come across. What is appropriation? Now, appropriation is different to adaptation, and it's important that we understand what the difference is. So appropriation is the deliberate reworking of images and styles from earlier well-known texts. But it's different to adaptation because quite often it's done without the authority of the original author or composer. And so we see, when you look this up, you get synonyms like borrowing, stealing, imitation, plagiarizing, quoting, literary piracy, pastiche, derivative. All right, so all of these words that show some sort of piracy has occurred, and so someone has taken the work of somebody else and appropriated it without their permission. One really big example is cultural appropriation, which some of you might have heard of, and Victoria's Secret is known for doing this, where they will take the sort of cultural references that we get from certain minority groups. So here we've got our Native Americans, and over here we've got them dressing up, or Victoria's Secret dressing up their models in the same sort of outfit. Now, cultural appropriation is something which often shows the dominant group over that of a minority group, and so it's frowned upon. And that's one way that we can see appropriation with literature as well, is when somebody steals the idea of somebody else and uses it in order to sort of, show their work as more powerful or to gain power themselves through their own work. Now, adaptation is a little bit different because it is the adapting of a literary source, so a novel, a short story, a poem, to another genre or medium, like film, a stage play, or a video game. But the important thing here is that the text becomes more contextually appropriate. So if I go back here, if you look at these images, it's probably not contextually appropriate for that model to be dressing in that way, which makes it appropriation. However, if we look at these images, so for instance, the original Cinderella, which was all about women, cooking, cleaning, and being treated like slaves, she turns into here this more independent sort of Cinderella in Into the Woods. Same with Sleeping Beauty, kissed by her true love who she really kind of hasn't met before, and Maleficent's the bad guy. Whereas in the new version of Maleficent, we see a twist on, or a subversion of those fairy tale sort of tropes. So we've got here adaptation, which changes, or intertextual texts which are adapted and changed in order for a new audience to make new sense out of older ideas. Alright, so here we have our images of Red Peter, of King Kong, of Kafka, and I'm hoping that you can see the relationship between a lot of text. So King Kong really doesn't have anything to do with Red Peter, but because we've read Red Peter and we've seen King Kong, we can kind of draw our own connections between those texts. And one of the things about intertextuality, or that people often say about adaptations and appropriations, is the idea that nothing is actually original. So over here we're looking at sort of Nottingham University has a look at Shakespearean works and how they're often adapted and appropriated. And they say that there are several misconceptions when we try to define adaptation and appropriation. Is that the idea of an original, they say Shakespeare, but we're looking at any original, is essentially void. So an original is a concept that is utterly bound in time and place and can never be replicated exactly. So the idea that an original is original because you can't completely recreate it is important. But we also have to understand that there are no real texts that aren't based somehow on another idea. Okay, so there's that paradox that we've got there of something that is completely original because it was made in a certain context, but also things that follow on from each other and new ideas that developed because of old ideas. Now that's from Nottingham University.
The laws of this land enslave people to its king. A king who offers nothing in return.
Robin Longstride, also known as Robin of the Hood.
For the crimes of incitement to cause unrest, I declare him to be an outlaw!
Okay, so I had to put that in because obviously Robin Hood is from Nottingham, but also because the next clip I show you, I'm hoping you see the intertextual connection between it and Robin Hood.
From outlaw
Drop your arms!
to hero,
We're robbing the bank.
There's enough in there to pay the rent.
his courage inspired a nation,
You took a risk coming here.
Yes.
and his name
You're Ned Kelly, aren't you?
became legend.
So hopefully you've been able to see the similarities between those two texts and the intertextual sort of ideas that you yourselves can make, because hopefully you know a bit about Robin Hood and a little bit about Ned Kelly, but it kind of shows you that although they're very different texts and original, they're also kind of not original because they follow the same theme. Okay? So to sum it all up, intertextuality is the relationship between different texts that we as an audience understand because we've seen those texts, or we understand the themes that we sort of can gain from those texts. To appropriate something is to take or make use of it without the authority or right to take exclusive possession of it. And the final one is adaptation. It is the act or process of adapting and modifying parts of texts, or sometimes whole texts, as we saw with Cinderella, that alters the original text and makes it more appropriate for current contexts and environments. And adaptations are often done, or sometimes done, hopefully, with the permission of the original composer. Okay, I'm going to leave you with this. Bye!
I challenge you to a duel. Toodaloo. Au revoir. Auf Wiedersehen. Ciao. Ding dao day.